Hey everyone, welcome to Ask the Experts for Azure Communication Services. I'll just go through a little bit of housekeeping first before we get started. Go ahead and start asking questions in the chat right now. All questions will appear once our moderator has approved them. Go ahead and upvote your favorite questions. Those will push them to the top so we can answer them, and we'll get to them in order. I'll also refer you guys to the Microsoft Code of Conduct. Please be respectful in the chat. Hopefully folks can read that or use the link. Let's get right to it. My name is Sean Henry. I'm a program manager with Azure Communication Services, and I have with me Bob, Anthony, and Marianne. Bob, how about you start off and introduce yourself?
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Sean. My name is Bob Sayre, and I'm the general manager of the newly launched Azure Communication Services.
Anthony, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Anthony Valentino, and I'm a program lead leading Azure Communication Services. Nice to meet you.
And Marianne.
Hi, I'm Marianne Niskowski, and I'm a program manager working on Azure Communication Services.
So some of you may have watched the breakout session about an hour ago that Bob and Marianne did. Really great session. Encourage everyone to go and take a look at that if you haven't already. But if you haven't, Bob, do you want to give us like a quick recap of what you guys talked about?
Sure, that sounds good. So we launched today Azure Communication Services, and Azure Communication Services is a new platform that includes APIs and SDKs, and it's built on the power of the communication primitives that power Microsoft Teams. So what that means is that you can take all of the communication capabilities that are available in Teams, and you can have direct access to those capabilities through a developer platform, which means that as a developer, you can take and embed communications flows such as voice and video, and that could be either one-to-one or a group. And by the way, we support groups of up to 350 people in those conversations. You can embed chat, you can acquire telephony numbers, and then you can make Pstn phone calls, as well as send inbound and outbound SMS text messages. It's all built on Azure, and so we have the scale and the geographic reach of what you would expect out of Azure. And because of the fact that it's built on the same cloud that powers Microsoft Teams, we have all of the scalability that we have experienced running by powering Microsoft Teams.
So we announced our public preview today, but we've been in a kind of private preview with some partners for a few months now. Anthony, do you want to talk about some of the apps that we've seen folks build?
Sure, thank you, Sean. So our partners are building a lot of exciting integrations leveraging Azure Communication Services. As you can imagine, they're leveraging our communication services to connect doctors and patients in remote health, also remote assistance and financial advisor services as well. We're also seeing interesting integrations showing up in the contact center space, and then moreover, as you can imagine, educationally, connecting students to teachers or professors. Holistically, the Azure Communication Platform is allowing us to connect two endpoints, most specifically in an identity agnostic manner. So a lot of our customers today are allowed to leverage their own identities. So in other words, they're not bringing their own M365 identity to the table. Instead, they're bringing what they have.
So I see a bunch of questions are already getting published. So let's get right to it. And I think that this leads in first question leads in nicely to some of our SDK availability. So I see here a question from Keith Nicholson. It says, I've seen the quick starts and have the web running, but I really need to bring into a UWP solution and prefer to do it without a web view, but using XAML-based components. What are my options? So Marianne, do you want to tell us a little bit about how to get started? What's the first thing to do to get started with the Azure SDK and the portal and so on, and then maybe talk about .NET and UWP availability?
Yeah, sure thing. So the portal is available today. It's live right now if you want to go check it out. And we also have a bunch of different SDKs available on our GitHub. So that's github.com/Azure/communication. We support in a bunch of different SDKs like .NET, Python, there's Java, JavaScript, iOS as well. .NET for Windows is on the roadmap. It's not quite done, but it'll be there soon. So stay tuned for that. And go to our GitHub for all that information.
Yeah, the GitHub looks great. I was just there a little while ago. All sorts of samples and code and everything there to get started. So next the question here, I think I'll come to you, Anthony. David says he's been exploring communication APIs to interact between a third-party application and a Teams call, which is typically a bit challenging. With ACS, at first blush, this seems much simpler. Can you comment on the roadmap to start a call outside of Teams, but direct participants into a Teams call?
Sure. This is actually a really exciting opportunity for us that we're seeking to enable in Azure Communication Services in the coming future, specifically allowing you to bring an Azure Communication Services endpoint and joining that to a Teams meeting. So in the context of, I believe that this is mentioned like a call, this is effectively just joining the two participants through a meeting. Now we are also evaluating other capabilities in the future and taking your feedback actively on a roadmap. So by all means, please do provide feedback on our GitHub channel. I'd love to take it into consideration for our future prioritization, as we're otherwise enabling you to create connected customer experiences at the edge. Cool.
Next one from Jason to you, Bob. Where does conversation content get stored when using chat or SMS features? Is this available as a resource for us to access directly in Azure like CosmoDB, or do I access it through an API call?
Those are all, we will store some internal information on the routing of the conversations, but in terms of persistence and storage, that's up to the developer who's using the service. So if you wanted to, you could build your own event hooks on your app tier essentially and build in your own storage, which means you can also then do things like indexing, search, and things like that.
So that's like, I think we saw in one of your demos, Bob, where there was event grid integration to listen on SMS message received and stuff like that. So if you wanted to store that information, you could, hook up like a function or something to that, listen to that event, and then store it in CosmoDB or blob storage on your own.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, so in the demo that we had a bot that was on the same thread of a conversation. In that case, it was actually an end user communicating with a bot, but you could easily have an agent or some kind of service that would also listen in on that thread and then take care of that storage.
Yeah, I think that's very cool. Next question, lots of questions here. Thanks, guys. Robert asks, what other channels of communication are you considering? A common channel with use like products like Twilio and WhatsApp. I'll send this one to you, Anthony. Where can folks file suggestions and feedback?
Thank you, Sean. So we are encouraging everyone to please file all of your feedback if you can on the GitHub channel at github.com/Azure/communication. We are also within the platform, you can effectively imagine, because it's a set of platform primitives or components, you can start effectively connecting to many channels, just building from the ground up. That being said, by all means, please do provide your feedback on the different channels as well as integration endpoints and describe those. We would love to have a better understanding to be able to enable the solutions that you're seeking to do.
Nice. Another one for, let's do Bob for this one. For Pstn connectivity, is it possible to bring your own carrier service like with Teams direct routing? Or will we need to purchase Pstn services from Amazon, from Microsoft? Wow, that was a slip. From Microsoft, folks. From Microsoft, folks. I'm glad that Bob's muted. He's cracking up right now.
Yeah. Right. So we do not yet support bring your own phone number solution. We will in the near future. So stay tuned.
Another one I see, Anthony, on some future features. Are there plans, anonymous? Are there plans for Microsoft to further use ACS with its own solutions? Dynamics was a great example we saw this morning as an example. Do you foresee Microsoft providing a native contact center solution rather than the current model, which relies on certified third-party providers? Just before you answer that, Anthony, I think everyone should take a look. There was a great demo, a little bit done in Satya's keynote, and there was another demo right afterwards of Dynamics 365 Omnichannel. One of the really cool things with that is that it's built on top of Azure Communication Services. They're using exactly the same functionality and APIs and services and infrastructure that we've made available now through Azure. Anthony, do you want to follow up on contact centers?
Sure. So holistically, we are integrating and partner with several contact centers throughout the entirety of many of our Microsoft offerings. That being said, I think the ask here is more in line with if we'll be diving deeper or having deeper integration across the rest of the Microsoft technology family. The short answer is yes. I mean that as a connective tissue or fabric, we would seek to be able to enable the services that are otherwise upwardly expressed through Teams, Dynamics, and then for that matter, building your own custom solution through an array, assembling an array of services that are otherwise available within Azure.
Next question from Michael. In terms of SMS, phone numbers, and PSTN, is the customer purchasing these from Microsoft, or can I bring my own services with me? Actually, so maybe this one for Marianne. When can we? I know we demoed a lot of stuff around phone number availability, and I know it's not quite available today. What can you tell us about the availability of getting phone numbers through Azure?
Real quick. Starting in early October, you'll be able to lease phone numbers from the Azure portal. So in the same portal you're using to create the resource, the Azure Communication resource today, you'll see a phone number displayed and it has a little coming soon message. That will be available early October. Yes, and I think bring your own carriers is on the roadmap. And again, if you have feedback, please go to the GitHub and file feedback there.
Great, thanks. I see another question here around interop with Teams. I know we hinted at that at the end of Bob's session. That will be available in a few months. So we're not talking about too much about that today, other than kind of what we showed and talked about in Bob's session. But we know everyone's really excited. So that's another good call out, similar to what Marianne and Anthony said. Go ahead and interact with us on our GitHub page. That's where we can interact with you guys and help prioritize the features and what we would like to enable.
Can I make a comment about that real quick, Sean? So the power of what is coming there means that as a developer, if you're thinking about call it like a B2C solution where you want to interact with your customers and have those customers come into some kind of a custom experience, whether it be a mobile app or a web experience, you can build out those experiences starting today, and you can use ACS to build that customer point of view. And then when we have the Teams interop available, there will not be, you won't need to make significant changes to bring that ACS or that Azure Communication Service endpoint into a Teams conversation. So the nice thing is that it's I would say coming, and it isn't going to require like a major overhaul of how you build your solution if you get started today.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the key point. Both we're kind of leveraging the fact that we're built on top of Teams infrastructure to make that like a really simple experience for developers. So while we don't have the details today, I think everyone will be pretty surprised about how easy it'll be. I think it's going to be great. Oh, here's an easy one. Where are the demos? Do you want to take that one, Marianne?
They're on GitHub. Everything will be on GitHub. So definitely check out github.com/Azure/communication.
Yeah, a bunch of stuff. The demo that you guys showed, right, is actually not up on GitHub yet. I think we'll get that up real soon. Now I know you guys were actually racing yesterday to get everything done and recorded in time that we didn't quite get it published. I think that'll be up there in a day or two. But there's definitely couple hero app samples that use more or less the same code that folks can try right now and get those deployed and get up and running. Anthony, here's a good one for you. Can you talk about the differences between Azure Communication Services and the Cloud Communication API provided by Microsoft Graph? It's from Ryan Knudsen.
Sure. Thank you, Sean. So some of the core differences between the Cloud Communication APIs and what is available through Azure Communication Services. Let's first start with what is otherwise afforded in Graph, which is effectively deeper integration to your users. So there's much more that you can do within the Graph ecosystem, whether it be accessing a calendar to schedule meetings and so forth, or really just dive deeper into the rest of the Teams data, or for that matter, chat data and so on, that's otherwise available to you to integrate with within your applications. So think of that more in context of actually just deeply integrating as it relates to Teams users or your M365 users themselves. Now, as Bob mentioned, when you're starting to get into some of those B2C scenarios where you're going to have, or for that matter, two endpoints that are not necessarily tied into M365 or Graph at all, then you have an Azure Communication Services platform, which allows you to connect those two endpoints, whether it be in a call or and other contexts like chat or SMS and so forth. Now, it's when you get into that cross integration, as we're considering the integration with interoperability in meetings, that we're now affording the mechanism for you to bring as many of your external Cs, if you will, that being the customers that say integrating through Contoso, your website, and then interacting with internal endpoints within Teams in that context, so that you can otherwise have that cross bridge between the two. So that's kind of like that would be effectively your end-to-end spectrum. So if you think heavily user-based, really want to tie in and really take advantage of the richness that's afforded to us within Microsoft and its M365. That really is what nails you down with the Graph APIs or the Cloud Communication APIs themselves. Otherwise, another key difference too with the Cloud Communication APIs to understand is that they require an M365 license, whereas Azure Communication Services is purely consumption-based billing, so you pay as you go for what you use. So they're flexible billing model within Azure Communication Services or licensed and utilized within the actual Graph ecosystem.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I think that leads nicely into the next question that I see here. Maybe Bob, you can expand on this one a little bit. Someone asked, are you using Azure Active Directory for authentication and authorization? I wonder, Bob, as a follow-on to that, if you could talk about we talked a lot about bring your own identity and being identity agnostic, I think, in your session. I wonder if you could talk about, how customers can, either bring their own identity or use Azure Active Directory or, whatever they want.
Yeah, so you're right, John. So we talked a little bit about this in the demo. One of the strengths of coming out to market with a platform offering like this is that we offer a bring your own identity solution. So we're not bound to an existing AAD user. We're not bound to any existing Microsoft product license. So what that means is you have some flexibility. In our system, you have the ability to, and in the samples, there's a generating access token sample, and it goes through this in detail, and so it'll explain it. But we generate a lightweight ID when a user is created, and all we do is we store that ID in an MRI format in our database. And so what that gives Contoso or a customer the ability to do is to map that ID to however you are storing information about those users. You could have Azure B2C AAD on your end. You could use Google Auth or some other auth provider, and all you should do in your app then is authenticate the user and then map your internal user ID with the user ID that identifies the user inside of Azure Communication Services, which you can then use to grant access tokens.
Yeah, that's really cool. It means that you can use whatever identity you want. You can bring, your own identity. You can use one that's already available from another provider. You can use Azure Active Directory, kind of use whatever you want. It's super simple. That's what I was most impressed by in the demos, is just how easy it was to just map whatever you're using to our own internal kind of user and token system.
That's right.
So next question I see here, I'm going to take this one selfishly because it's about Xamarin, which is something close to my heart. I want to build a Xamarin Forms app so that I could use the .NET SDK. But won't I need Xamarin Forms integration into Azure Communication Services? Will involve platform-specific integrations, which typically is strictly for Amazon Forms. Have Xamarin Forms Azure Communication apps been built yet? So I think Marianne answered a little bit earlier. The .NET SDK is coming soon. Certainly for a lot of our APIs that don't rely on platform-specific integrations. For example, like sending SMSs or chat, things like that don't actually really require too much device integration. But you're absolutely right, Anonymous, is that to integrate with the video renderers and the media elements and stuff on iOS, Android, and Windows will require a little bit more work. But I don't know if anyone on our team has tried it yet, but I certainly will as soon as we get our .NET SDK ready. I know there's a bunch of patterns in Xamarin Forms to integrate with native renderers. So I fully expect it'll be something possible, and hopefully we'll get a sample or blog post out pretty quick for that. So next up, sounds like pricing is a consumption usage-based model. Can you provide rough scenarios such as users, calls, time and call, etc., and how that relates to high-level cost? I'll send that one over to you, Anthony, and maybe you can you can point folks to where our pricing stuff is as well.
Sure thing. So I'll jump in and answer maybe 2 questions at the same time. I also see Sam here has a question about how could I apply Azure Communication Services in the healthcare industry. Are there several examples of that available? I think you saw with the demo that Bob and Marianne had put together and reviewed earlier. That's effectively kind of one build your own example. There are a litany of others, whether it be telehealth scenarios where you might have doctors wanting to meet with patients, both interestingly one-to-one or one-to-many for that matter, but just through Azure Communication Services where it's, again, identity agnostic. And then similarly, you can imagine scenarios where internally organizations or healthcare organizations have the vast majority of their users on Teams or a Teams client internally. However, the external expression of that healthcare organization is otherwise their website themselves, so Contoso Health or Contoso Med, where then the patient is logging into their Contoso Med portal then to communicate with, in this case, a healthcare provider or practitioner to be able to address any number of the elements that they are otherwise have in question. Now, with respect to the pricing and the models themselves, you can find more of this information available on our docs on azure.com that will provide the complete list of the prices for each service. As you can imagine, when a participant is joining a call, it's effectively billed on a per minute per participant basis. Similarly, chats per message and so forth. The rest of those details are otherwise available for you to read and understand the different pricing models themselves. So hope that was helpful.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing there, of course, is it's all integrated, into Azure and your Azure account. So you get all your billing going through your Azure account. I ended up using a lot of my credits this month trying out some of the new features, but it was pretty fun. Another question, let's for you, Bob. We talked a little bit about Teams integration. There's a question here from Anonymous. Will there be any notable limitations for non-Teams users connecting via Azure Communication Services to Teams users? Anything we want to talk about yet there?
I think we don't have a concrete answer on that yet. I will say that the way that we're thinking about doing this is we want to make sure to keep the quality of the conversation at the level that Teams offers in that conversation. And so when we bring an Azure Communication Service user into a conversation with a Teams user, we will make sure to have the same level of fidelity, essentially, and quality, end-to-end quality that you get on that Teams conversation. That being said, the scenario that we see being applied, it will be that in most cases the Azure Communication Service will be an external customer, so like more of a B2C scenario, and so the level of permissions, for example, will likely be restricted as compared to what you would see from a Teams client.
That kind of reminded me a little bit. We were chatting earlier, Bob, about one of the number of participants and streams and stuff that were available. And I thought it was really interesting, in a similar vein that, as we see improvements for Teams, number of videos, number of streams that are concurrently available, number of participants, all of that stuff is made available through Azure Communication Services as well. So we're really kind of doubling down on using the same infrastructure across the board.
Yep, that's exactly right. And so the great thing is when, like you said, when we have any quality improvements, when we have scale improvements, for example, the number of participants in a session, the number of chat users in a session, we get to take advantage of all those advances that are made in the cloud that powers Teams.
So next question, this is kind of a good one. What regions are we rolling out Azure Communication Services? Marianne, do you want to take this one? And what our availability is in public preview and right now?
Yeah, so in public preview, we'll be available in the US geography, and we'll be rolling out to more regions as we approach GA. So yeah, we'll be in US initially.
Yeah, and I see a follow-on question here from Dave around government cloud availability. I think one of the things that's interesting, if you look up on the Azure pages, Azure Communication Services is considered a non-regional resource. So this is kind of similar to other services like Azure Active Directory and how they work, which means that it's it's available from anywhere globally, and then we have specific geos and locations that you can pick when you create the resource, which mainly specify like where your data resides. This is great. We're getting a lot of questions. I'm really excited about these questions. Like, you guys have just known about this for like 4 hours, and we've gotten like hundreds of questions. I'm just shocked at how quickly everyone's been able to get some good questions in. I'm actually going to take a little break and go through some of these questions. I don't know, Marianne, maybe do you want to talk about some of the demos that we did real quick, and I'll try and get some questions, some of the demos from your session.
Yeah, so we had 3 demos in the session. The first one was talked about earlier with, one of the demos was talked about earlier with Event Grid with a chat bot. So you have a customer that's chatting with a chatbot, and you're using Event Grid to receive those events and run an Azure function. And we actually use Q&A Maker for this too, to build out the knowledge base behind the chatbot. So we actually got the chat message received by Event Grid, and then we would run an Azure function that would send that message to the bot and see if it was a good answer or not. And if the answer wasn't satisfactory, then we would pull in a real person into that chat. So it would go from a user chatting with a bot to chatting with a actual person. And then we did a video call demo, which was pretty simple, where Bob and I were one was logged in as a doctor, one was logged in as a patient, and we just had a video call to talk about whatever we wanted to talk about. And then the other demo, the final demo, was using SMS and Logic App Connector. So we actually used the Logic App Connector to trigger sending an SMS message out. And this was done using an HTTP request to trigger the flow. And then you would just pass in the phone number you wanted to send to and the message body that you wanted to send.
Yeah, I thought those are like all really good demos. I'm looking at a question here. Someone's asking about integration with Bot Framework to do kind of chat and IVR style scenarios. I think that's very interesting. We used Q&A Maker in the demo, right? That's what you guys used, and I think in one of our early kind of versions of the demo used Bot Framework and was able to integrate with that like pretty nicely. And that's something we all kind of were pretty excited about too. Is getting Bot Framework really nicely integrated with some connections and connectors into Bot Framework. So I think we'll see a bunch of stuff there happening soon. But it's all like pretty slick and straightforward to get that integrated, at least in my opinion. Another one I see a couple questions about folks asking to be able to record calls, and I'll just answer that one real quickly. That's the one. Go ahead and check out our GitHub page. Actually, what I'll do, you guys are watching this slide here with Marianne, Anthony, and Bob's faces. How about I get some good information up on here so you don't see them twice? That's a good segue over to where you can learn more about Azure Communication Services. First of all, go to aka.ms Azure Communication Services, or just search for us on azure.com, and you can get our product landing page. There's some really good documentation. I was pouring through those last week. The quick starts and stuff are like really great. Like, it's super quick to get started. If you go to aka.ms Communication Services Overview, finally there's a mechanics session coming soon, which will be hosted by our fearless leader, Scott Van Vliet. And hopefully you guys took a look at the digital breakout session that was earlier today. That will also be rebroadcast, I think, 2 other times. So go ahead and search for that. It'll be broadcast, I think, in about 12 hours, and then again in about 16 hours. And then finally, aka.ms ACS-SDKs. That's our GitHub page. Some of our SDKs, a lot of our SDKs are part of the Azure SDK, so you can find a lot of stuff there, and that's great because it's deeply integrated with the Azure SDK stuff, but then you can also find our samples and more information on our SDKs there. How are we doing for time? Are we almost out of time, or do we have time for one more question? How about we do this? How about we finish off? How about each of you in turn tell me what feature you love the most about Azure Communication Services? Start with you, Marianne.
I think one of the demos that I talked about, the SMS and Logic App connector, was just so cool. I think it shows how flexible this platform is and how you can integrate with so many different Azure services to build a unique solution for your what you're trying to solve.
Bob?
I like the platform aspects of the offering because it really gives you the ability to either start with a few lines of code and have a really nice integrated solution, or go as deep as you want and build whatever you want. So the breadth of the communication capabilities that are available, the breadth of the either admin as well as the data plane APIs and SDKs, I think it seems like it, I like the fact that you can combine all these things together and then also integrate them with a number of different Azure services.
Yeah, and last to you, Anthony, closing thoughts.
Oh, thanks, Sean. I like the deep integration with Azure because it ultimately is affording us the flexibility that we've been seeking to provide for developers for any number of years now. So you can effectively bring your own identity, you pay as you go, use what you need to use, and integrate with as many services as you'd like to across the board. And then I'm encouraged and excited about the future of possibilities that we're going to enable as we continue to look towards the team interoperability capabilities that we're going to play with in the near future. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're looking forward to what you're building.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm going to get out there right now as soon as it's over, get started building some apps. I know there's a ton of other sessions that have been demoing some apps. Another one I just wanted to call out, stay tuned. Scott Hanselman's, I think, has a pretty cool demo. So little birdie told me he's going to have a cool demo in his session tomorrow. So definitely looking forward to what everyone can build. Thanks everyone for joining us on the AMA. I think that about wraps us up for now. If you really have more questions that we didn't get to, we are doing another AMA later on, I think in about 12 hours. So maybe a little bit longer than that. Go ahead and look for that in the Azure schedule. You can add that to your backpack, and we'll see you then. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep, thank you.